So chapter 9, and as always, we want to remember context. So we look back to the end of chapter 8. Jesus had just finished having a back and forth debate about who Jesus is and that he is greater than Abraham. And he was about to be stoned by the Jews, and he hid himself and went out of the temple. So now Jesus is walking out of the temple. So that's where we walk into chapter 9. So chapter 9, verse 1. As he passed by. So Jesus is walking out of the temple and on his way out, walking down the street, the marketplace. As Jesus is passing by, he saw a man blind from birth. Verse 2, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So notice that the disciples are uninterested in helping the man, actually, but just simply discussing the cause for his condition. Verse 3, Jesus answered, It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We see here that Jesus is not focused on whose fault is it, where is the blame, but in fact the focus is solely on God and God's plan. This concept in Jewish tradition, and honestly sometimes amongst us Christians as well, that we think the greater the suffering, the greater the sinner. And that's truly just bad theology. And that really shows us that the Jews, and even ourselves as modern day Christians, we often have not really advanced far from Job's friends. That whole debate in the Old Testament about what is it that you did, you might have done, you could have done, you should have done, you didn't do. What is it that you did that caused your suffering? And in the end, God doesn't even answer any of that. God just says, it's not about you. And so here in the New Testament, we have a very similar case study here where Jesus said it's not about this man's sin or his parents, but that the work of God might be displayed in him. Verse 4, we must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. So here the day, the idea is the time of day. There's double meaning. One, you want to work while there's daylight out so that you're able to work. And if it's nighttime, then you can't really physically work because you don't have electricity, you don't have light. But also the idea is the time of Jesus' earthly ministry. So the idea is he's saying, I need to do God's work while I am on earth before I ascend back into heaven. So there's this time, this sense of urgency. Verse 5, as long as I am in this world, I am the light of the world. And so Jesus really doubles down on that second meaning where he says, Jesus, when I am in this world, I am that light of the world. And so the idea is when I am here, it is daytime. And during my daytime, light time here, we can do more of God's work. Verse 6, having said this, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. So Jesus basically bends down, spits on the ground, and uses mud and his spit and mixes to make it salve. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud, verse 7, and said to him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he, the blind man, went and washed and came back seeing. Verse 6 and 7, a lot of people will say, oh, it's gross. Why did he have to use saliva? But really, there are many good rationales and good background for this. So first of all, as humans in Genesis, we know we were made from dust and clay. So the idea of mixing mud, that makes sense. Now, using saliva, I understand as modern day medical advances, we understand there's a lot of bacteria in there and we wouldn't recommend that. But back then, there was this idea of using saliva, having certain healing properties mixed with herbs. So there is a medicinal basis to this. Another thing is, why didn't he just speak it or touch him or just say it? Now, many people think oftentimes when you compare Jesus's miracles, he uses alternate healing methods. So no one could really make a formula and kind of box God in or limit and say, this is what needs to be done in order for healing. So really the focus is the power in God and not the method. So here he uses this method of mixing saliva with mud, making it into kind of a paste and putting it onto the man's eyes. Now, this man can't see him. This man doesn't know who he is. He does obey though. So that last line, that last half of verse 7, the blind man went. Immediately he went and washed and came back seeing. Verse 8, the neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Verse 9, some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. But he kept saying, the blind man himself kept saying, I am that man. I am the man. So it's very interesting here where people now are seeing this man as seeing, and this man is an adult. And so the idea is he's been blind from birth. So he has been sitting as a blind beggar on the street side publicly for years, if not decades. So people are very familiar with who this man is. So people are split. People are divided. Is it him? No, it just looks like him. No, I swear it's him. But this man is self-disclosing. He's self-identifying. He's saying, it is me. I'm the guy. I'm the guy. Verse 10, so they said to him, then how were your eyes open? Fair question. Verse 11, he answered, the man called Jesus. So at this point, the blind man knew very little about who Jesus is, Jesus' ministry, his identity, any of that. So he just says, there's this man called Jesus. The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. So he's reporting very factually, very step by step. I did this, I was told this, and I did this. Verse 12, they said to him, where is he? He said, the blind man said, I do not know. Verse 13, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Verse 14, now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Now this is very interesting. He intentionally chose Sabbath day. Obviously, Jesus could have chosen a different day. Sounds like the blind man is always sitting there on the street side. Jesus could have chosen a different day, but instead he intentionally chose a Sabbath day to challenge this tradition of upholding and prioritizing ritualistic tradition over the physical and even spiritual healing of other people. Verse 15, so the Pharisees again asked him, the blind man, how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. So we see here the blind man's testimony continues to stay the same. He doesn't change his story. It's exactly as is. He's just reporting factually what happened. Verse 16, some of the Pharisees said, this man, in a very condescending way, this dude, this guy is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. So the Pharisees are pointing to Jesus saying, this guy, this dude is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. So here, the reason why, and you're thinking it's just making mud, and it's because this kneading tradition is actually forbidden on Sabbath as work. So the idea is of kneading dough, so kneading like flour to make bread, the action of kneading. But because making mud and clay with your saliva constitutes as the kneading action, and so therefore, this small action of making a little paste with dirt and saliva into mud, that now triggers the clause on kneading that is forbidden on Sabbath. Jesus, once again, really intentional. He could have definitely chosen a different method, but on the Sabbath, he could have just spoken it, then it wouldn't have triggered any Sabbath laws. He could have chosen a non-Sabbath day to do the kneading, but he very intentionally chose the day as well as the exact method that he used to heal the blind man. Verse 16 would continue, but others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them. So that's true. The Pharisees is like, this guy Jesus must not be from God if he's violating the Sabbath to heal the man. But many other witnesses are saying, who else can have this power? Who else? A sinner cannot have the power to heal and give sight. And that's 100% true. Verse 17, so they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes? He said, he is a prophet. So it's interesting because the blind man has already answered multiple times, but these people still either do not believe or do not want to believe. And they're trying to kind of force maybe a different narrative or a different story from this blind man. But the blind man sticks to his guns. And in fact, at first, he said, this is just a man named Jesus. But now, over time, he's like, you know what? He's actually a prophet. So even in his mind, we actually see a progress of how the blind man is starting and beginning to believe and lean in towards Jesus. Verse 18, the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight. Now, this is ridiculous. They are so unwilling to believe that this miracle has happened by Jesus that they're now thinking, this guy was just never blind. He was maybe pretending, or maybe we got the wrong guy. So they're going through all types of scenarios just to prove that this miracle has either never happened or Jesus just does not have the power, because they are so against Jesus. It's to the point where they're pulling their parents. They're trying to find the parents of the blind guy to say, I need a testimony. I need a witness statement. Tell me, was your son born blind or not? Verse 19, after they called the parents and asked them, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" So they're really questioning and really pressuring him. Verse 20, his parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind." So they acknowledge, yes, this man is our son. He truly is our son. And yes, we affirm that he was born blind. Verse 21, "But how he now sees, we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." So the parents are actually terrified of the church leaders, of the Pharisees, of the people in power. So they acknowledge, yes, this is our son. Yes, he was biologically born blind as an infant out of the womb. But then regarding this whole situation with how he was healed on the Sabbath, by who, using what method, they're just pleading the fifth. They're like, nope, we're not going to answer because they're so scared. As opposed to, if you think about it as parents, if my child was born blind and now he receives sight, I would be overjoyed. I'd be like, thank you, thank you. I'd be like, who is this man who saved my child, right? But it is to the point where this joy had to be suppressed. This would have been the biggest celebration in their life, probably now had to be suppressed, held in out of fear of being thrown out of the community, being thrown out of the synagogue, that pressure from the religious leaders, those that have power in both spiritual and political realms. Verse 22, so John puts in parentheses. So John's a great author. He just wants to clarify, just in case you weren't sure why the parents answered. John here gives us a footnote right in verse 22. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. So 100%, if you were wondering that fact, John is like, yes, that is exactly why his parents refrained from following up on how he was healed. And in fact, kind of pushed it onto their child. They're like, ask him, he is of age. They're so scared of being kicked out of the synagogue that they're literally pushing the burden back onto their child. Verse 23, therefore his parents said, he is of age. Ask him. Verse 24. So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind and said to him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. This man, once again, is referring to Jesus. So here they say, give glory to God. At first, we might, especially as an English reader, we might think, oh, maybe they're just praising God as part of their court process. But really what they're saying, it's an admonishment. It's an admonishment to tell the truth. They're telling the blind man, remember, you're in God's presence right now. Tell the truth. Very similar to kind of the court where you're bringing up a witness, put their hands on the Bible and say, just to remind you, you better be testifying the truth or else. So it's actually a threat, a religiously veiled threat. Verse 25, he answered. So the blind man answered. He's now being called a second time to the witness stand. He answered, whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. So the blind man, and I really think because receiving sight is so transformative and so life-changing, and it was unmerited. It was a free miracle just given to him. That at first he called Jesus just a man. Then second time he's elevating him to a prophet. And this time he's like, look, I don't know if he's a sinner or not, but I myself, I can testify that I used to be blind, but now I see. My life was changed. My body was transformed. That I can tell you 100% for sure because I am that person. Verse 26, they, so the Pharisees, they said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And once again, if we're counting, this is the third time. This is the third time that they're asking for the details, the recount of the events. And so I love it. Verse 27, the blind man kind of answers in a really cheeky kind of way. The blind man, he answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? And so it's hilarious. I agree. Like, why are you making me repeat his miraculous signs again and again and again? I've told you once, I've told you twice, and you refuse to believe, but you keep wanting to listen to it. What is it about it? And obviously, the leaders are pissed. They're angry. Verse 28, then they reviled him. So they like threw insults and they're like, how dare you? You're a beggar. You're a blind man. And back then they thought if you're blind, you're probably born in sin and you're terrible. And us here, we're the wealthy, religious, powerful people that have sight. So clearly we're less sinful than you, or maybe they even think we've never sinned before. We're so much more righteous. And so they really hurled insult and reviled him, saying, you are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. So here the Pharisees really are drawing a line. The Pharisees, the Jewish leaders, are like, well, you're the disciple of Jesus, but we're above you. We're superior because we are the disciples of Moses. Verse 29, they continue to speak. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, once again, a contemptuous, they won't even say Jesus' name, this man, we do not know where he comes from. Verse 30, the man answered, why? This is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. And once again, this blind man, it's just so interesting if we look into him, is that his faith continues to grow as he is being pressured, cross-examined by all the Jewish leaders and the rabbis. And out of pressure, he's not actually withdrawing or shrinking or cowering. He's actually getting bolder and bolder with each questioning, with each pressure point. So he's answering, this is an amazing thing. So not just I was blind and now I see, but this fact in and of itself is amazing. We all don't know where he comes from, and yet he is able to do this miracle. Verse 31, we know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Verse 32, never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. And this is 100% true. And so him, a blind beggar on the street side, probably never gone to rabbinic school, is essentially schooling the Jewish leaders and the Pharisees and the teachers, essentially quoting back the Old Testament, which for sure the Pharisees also know very, very well, that it is known that God does not listen to the prayers of a sinner, as in he doesn't grant them. He doesn't do what a sinner requests. So as in here, not just passively like I heard it, but he does not listen and do as a sinner prays and asks for. And also, never in the Old Testament has a person who was born blind later given sight. And that is 100% true. And in fact, God himself says only God himself is able to give sight. And so here the beggar actually very accurately quotes and references Old Testament in saying, if this guy is not from God, he would not have been able to give me sight. Verse 33, if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. Verse 34, they, the teachers, the religious leaders who were opposing this blind man's testimony, they answered him, you were born in utter sin, and would you teach us? And they cast him out. They just threw him out. And so the idea is that they are so upset and so insulted because this commoner, probably even lower than a commoner, a beggar, a blind beggar, that's assumed not only to be poor and helpless, but also born in utter sin. Back in their tradition, that's what they assumed of people that were born blind. This person is schooling them on Old Testament theology and the attributes of God and the procedure and the crossworks of miracles. So they're upset, they're pissed, and so they kick him out and they cast him out. And here's not just, they physically probably kicked him out at that time, but they also essentially excommunicated him. And so this here is an impulsive action, and there are rules and policies on how to excommunicate somebody from the synagogue, from Mosaic Levitical law, but this was not how it was done. This was not how it should be done. It should be done in a careful examination, a formal official court process, and not an impulsive emotional action. And so this also was an abuse of their position, their official position, both as political and religious. Verse 35, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? And I think this is so personal and so important that Jesus heard what had happened to this man. And Jesus wasn't like, all right, he's going to be fine. He actually proactively seeks out this man, finds this man, and asks him, and wants to connect and has a deeper conversation with him. And this next conversation is even more transformative than just the physical healing. It is a spiritual and emotional healing. Jesus asked him, do you believe in the Son of Man? Verse 36, he, the blind man, he answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? So you hear it in this blind man's voice. Now seeing man, a blind now seeing man. Who is it? I want to know, who is this? Who is the Son of Man, so that I can come and believe in him? You hear the desperation and the yearning and the desire. Verse 37, Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. So Jesus self-identifies right now. You've already seen him. And once again, the irony, this man has never seen his whole life. So right now, Jesus is like, the one you are seeing with your eyes that you just received sight. I am that one. I am the one who is speaking to you right now. Verse 38, he said, the blind man said, Lord, I believe. That's it. He didn't need any more explanations, ID cards, self-identification about what are your credentials, who's your testimony, who's backing you, who are you under. He's just like, yes, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. The blind man worshiped Jesus immediately in that moment, in that place. Verse 39, Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." And so here the idea is that the world as we stand, we're already judged. Starting from the Garden of Eden after coming out, Adam and Eve, we are all in judgment. We are all standing in judgment. But because of that judgment, that is why, to save us, to give us a way out from that eternal death and separation from God, that is why Jesus came. So Jesus came because the world is already judged, already condemned. And Jesus is coming so that all of us who were not able to see, all of us who were spiritually blind before, we are now able to spiritually see. But those who think that they spiritually see, who think they know, who think they already have righteousness, gaining it from their own hands, those people will in fact become so stubborn and reject Jesus and in fact become spiritually blind. So here Jesus makes this big statement about why he's coming and also what are the implications when Jesus comes on earth. Verse 40, some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" So Jesus goes out, seeks the blind man. We don't know why the Pharisees are there. Maybe they're still following him around. Maybe they're trying to catch Jesus. Maybe they think that Jesus is going to approach the blind man. We don't know, but there are some Pharisees nearby and they overhear Jesus' conversation with this blind man. It's very intimate and personal transformation and honestly salvation between Jesus and the blind man. And they're thinking, are we also blind? Verse 41, Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, we see, your guilt remains." So the idea is that if you were truly blind, then it's not your fault because you didn't see Jesus. You didn't get a chance. But now because you do see and you saw the signs and the miracles and the testimony that Jesus himself is giving, that in itself now condemns and judges you. So therefore he says, when you say we see, your guilt remains. So it's very interesting. We look back at this whole chapter, just that progress of the blind man. He continues to respond to Jesus. He starts with Jesus is just this man named Jesus who healed me. Then he said, you know what? I think he's a prophet. And so in the first cross-examination with the Pharisees, he was like, I think he's a prophet. Otherwise, how can he have the power? He must be from God. But eventually, as push comes to shove, people are bullying him and really pushing him into a corner. Eventually, he just stands up and says, this man has to be from God. He cannot be a sinner. Otherwise, these things don't make sense. He can't be doing these things. He can't be operating with such power from God. And finally, when Jesus himself approaches him, this man falls down on his knees and worships him as the Son of Man, as the Christ and Messiah. So we really see this conversion process of going from I couldn't see, physically blind, and then becoming physically able to see. And we also see parallel journey is that this blind man is also going from spiritually blind to being spiritually able to see. And so it's this wonderful picture that God is trying to show us of spiritual and physical blindness, giving a really good example of what that truly means. So great chapter, so much to unpack. And obviously, when we talk about blindness, we are saying if you're blind, essentially your vision is in the dark. You cannot see. Versus when you do receive sight, the first thing you will see is light. And so Jesus again and again, starting from John chapter 1, refers to himself as light of the world. So Jesus is coming so that he can restore humans' visions, so that we can be healed from blindness. Here we have a physical healing of physiological blindness, but really Jesus is coming to heal us from spiritual blindness. And I think that is such a great point in this chapter.